Pokrovsk has now become the epicenter of the fiercest fighting since the fall began. Ukrainian reconnaissance drones have reported the movement of a Russian armored column more than 10 kilometers long, consisting of T-72B3M tanks, T-90M Proriev tanks, and BMP combat vehicles supported by long-barreled artillery from behind the front lines. Ukrainian forces immediately responded with precision artillery fire and FPV drone strikes. Footage from unmanned aerial vehicles shows large explosions among Russian formations that have just entered the western area of the city. However, the intensity of Russian fire has only increased, indicating Moscow's determination to make Pokrovsk a gateway into the heart of central Donetsk. The Russian armored group looked very formidable. Then this happened. On the front lines of Konstantinovka, an area now one of the most heated areas in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, artillery boomed relentlessly. Amidst the hail of bullets and ground-shaking explosions, a single Russian tank took center stage, the T-72B, a modernized version of the legendary T-72, which that day achieved the remarkable feat of surviving 16 RPG hits and heavy artillery fire in a single day. Imagine the pressure on the battlefield, Russian infantry advancing meter by meter, while Ukrainian reconnaissance drones hovered overhead, searching for the slightest opening to disrupt the enemy formation. Under such conditions, the T-72B3M became a mobile fortress, the primary defense for troops attempting to capture enemy positions on the outskirts of Konstantinovka. The T-72B3M is no ordinary armored vehicle. It represents a profound modernization of the classic T-72 generation, now equipped with a 1,130 horsepower V92S2F engine, the new Sosna-U fire control system, and third-generation reliked reactive armor, a technology that minimizes the effects of cumulative projectiles and kinetic shells. Every piece of armor plate and composite layer on the tank's hull acts like a living suit of armor, absorbing the energy of RPG hits and shockwaves from enemy artillery. That day, the tank became the primary target of Ukrainian forces. They fired portable anti-tank missiles and grenade launchers repeatedly 16 times in less than 12 hours. But the results were surprising. Only minor damage to the outer armor, while the main systems remained fully functional. The tank's crew, consisting of 3 men, commander, gunner, and driver, acted swiftly. Amidst the barrage of fire, they constantly shifted positions, firing their 125mm rounds at Ukrainian fire points, while simultaneously covering the movement of infantry taking cover behind them. The city of Pokrovsk, formerly known as Krasnoarmeysk, has become one of the most crucial centers in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. The constant sounds of explosions, gunfire, and drones signal that the battlefield in eastern Ukraine has entered its most brutal and complex phase. Any military alliance approaching Russia's borders will be considered a direct threat, warned Russian President Vladimir Putin in one of his most controversial statements of the early part of the decade. Interestingly, however, at the time of the warning, Ukraine had not even formally applied for NATO membership. So, why is Putin so concerned? What exactly makes this one Eastern European country such a source of global tension? For Russia, NATO is more than just a defense organization. In the Kremlin's narrative, NATO is a symbol of Western expansion, steadily moving closer to the historic territory of the Soviet Union. Since 1999, former Eastern Bloc countries, Poland, Hungary, the Czech Republic, and even the Baltic states have gradually joined the NATO umbrella. For Moscow, each expansion means one thing: the encirclement is closing in. The distance between NATO bases and major Russian cities like St. Petersburg is now only hundreds of kilometers. And And if Ukraine joins, NATO will have direct access to Russia's western border just 500 kilometers from Moscow. That's why, for Putin, Ukraine isn't just a neighbor, it's the last line of defense. On the other hand, Ukraine sees things differently. Since 2014, after the annexation of Crimea and the war in Donbass, many Ukrainians have argued that the only way to ensure their country's security is to join NATO to receive protection under Article 5. An attack on one member is considered an attack on all. And in February 2022, the world witnessed the consequences of that logic. Russia launched a full-fledged invasion of Ukraine. Moscow called it a special military operation, claiming it was to prevent Ukraine from becoming an enemy base on its doorstep. Ironically, however, the results were the opposite. While Ukraine had not previously been close to NATO, after the war began, NATO's support for Kyiv actually increased dramatically. Hundreds of billions of dollars in military aid are flowing, and security cooperation between Ukraine and the West is now closer than ever. Since the early 1990s, Ukraine has been one of the most active partners in NATO's Partnership for Peace program. The relationship includes joint exercises, intelligence exchanges, and military capability enhancements. According to an official statement from the NATO General Secretariat, this partnership is not a form of military expansion, but rather an effort to build stability and interoperability between Ukraine and member states. However, following Russia's massive invasion in February 2022, the cooperation has evolved to a much more intense level. NATO is now the primary link in coordinating military assistance, logistics, and combat training for Ukrainian forces. Since the war began, NATO member states have provided billions of euros in military aid to Ukraine. This assistance includes advanced air defense systems, including Patriot and NASAMS, modern armored vehicles and tanks such as the Leopard 2 and Challenger 2, tactical and technical training for tens of thousands of Ukrainian personnel, and logistical, medical, and intelligence support. Since the beginning of the war, NATO has focused on one thing: ensuring that Ukrainian forces not only possess modern weapons but also operate them with high precision. That's why the Western Alliance is now expanding its large-scale military training program for Ukrainian troops, including elite units like the Azov Regiment, which is trained to master NATO main battle tanks like the Leopard 2, Challenger 2, and Abrams M1A1. This training goes beyond vehicle maneuvering techniques, but also encompasses modern armored attack tactics, coordinated maneuvers with drones, and urban battlefield survival strategies. Instructors from Germany, Poland, and the UK are leading the training at Eastern European bases, where each Ukrainian crew is taught to adapt to the NATO-style fighting philosophy: fast, precise, and coordinated. Our goal is not just to transfer equipment, but also a new way of thinking. Tanks are not just war machines, but part of an integrated command system, said a NATO instructor who led the Leopard 2 exercises in Poland. NATO member states are currently engaged in one of the largest logistical operations in modern history. Hundreds of convoys are carrying weapons, ammunition, and heavy military equipment across the border into Ukraine. This aid includes modern air defense systems such as the Patriot and IRIS-T, portable anti-tank systems such as the Javelin and NLAW, long-range artillery such as the HIMARS and CASAR, reconnaissance and attack drones, main battle tanks, and multi-role fighter jets undergoing pilot training. Each of these deliveries is being carried out in full coordination between allied nations, ensuring that the massive aid to Ukraine does not weaken the defense posture of any NATO member. To strengthen the effectiveness of assistance and training, NATO established NATO Security Assistance and Training for Ukraine, NSA-2, a new structure tasked with coordinating all military support and training programs. Headquartered in Wiesbaden, Germany, NSATU serves as the logistics control center for Ukraine's entire military training program in Europe. The organization is staffed by approximately 700 personnel from NATO allies and partners. 3 major logistics hubs in Eastern Europe ensure the unimpeded flow of equipment, spare parts, and training personnel. This is where every tank, drone, and artillery system sent to Ukraine is registered, inspected, and then integrated into Kyiv's combat systems. This training and assistance program has proven to be changing the dynamics of the war on the ground. Ukrainian forces are now able to effectively operate Western tanks in integrated formations, combining ground attacks with unmanned aerial support. The efficient movement of Leopard and Abrams tanks through the muddy terrain of Donetsk, for example, demonstrates a significant increase in Ukraine's tactical capabilities compared to the beginning of the war. Military analysts note that each new NATO training session directly reduces the capability gap between Ukrainian forces and Western military professional standards. Ukraine is now not just a recipient of aid, but part of the evolution of modern military doctrine, stated a defense analyst from the London Defense Institute. This war has transformed Ukraine from a mere partner nation into NATO's primary strategic partner in Eastern Europe. The training and assistance provided have not only strengthened Kyiv on the battlefield, but also marked the largest military transformation in modern European history. Today, every tank moving across the Donetsk front is not just a symbol of aid, but tangible evidence that Ukraine has become a vital part of the new global security architecture. In short, training by NATO allies doesn't just teach how to shoot or drive Western tanks, it transforms the doctrine, discipline, interoperability, and logistical capabilities of Ukrainian forces. The result? Ukrainian units are becoming faster, more precise, and more resilient on the modern battlefield. NATO training teaches not just the operation of vehicles, for example, Leopard 2, or weapons systems, but also the philosophy of their use. How tanks work in formation, coordinate with artillery and drones, minimize injury maneuvers, and recovery procedures. For example, tank courses at Polish training centers teach the entire cycle: operation, maintenance, and combined arms tactics. This allows crews to understand not only their units, but also how to maximize the tank's contribution to modern combat. When new systems arrive, Western tanks, NATO-caliber artillery, air defense systems, without common standard procedures, they become less effective. NATO training standardizes communications, maintenance procedures, logistical security tactics, and sensor integration, so Ukrainian units can combine disparate platforms into a single fighting machine, increasing decision-making speed and reducing fatal errors. NSATU and training centers in Europe are designed to coordinate this process. One aspect often overlooked by the public: maintenance. NATO teaches logistics support networks, damage diagnosis, and spare parts management that keep tanks, artillery, and air systems operational longer, critical factors when supplies are limited. Without sustainment capabilities, advanced equipment becomes mere window dressing. NATO exercises fill this gap. As a concrete example, Ukrainian crews receive intensive training on Leopard 2 seconds at NATO. Allied facilities in Europe, hours-long sessions covering combat tactics, maintenance, and live fire. This experience accelerates the learning curve, allowing Ukrainian troops to effectively deploy Western tanks on the front lines much faster than if they were learning by doing. NATO not only trains in the use of heavy weapons, but also in how to combine intelligence, ISR, FPV drone strikes, and precision artillery. Ukraine, already adept at using drones, became even more lethal when NATO helped teach them how to synchronize the systems: who searches, who marks, who fires. The result: faster, more destructive strikes, and with more measurable collateral damage. Professional training improves combat discipline, rules of fire, ammunition control, casualty evacuation, and communication procedures. This reduces panic losses and increases the effectiveness of small units in the field. Consistently trained units survive longer, are able to execute complex maneuvers, and make better decisions under pressure. Field reports and analysis demonstrate this effect in several intensively trained battalions. Congress.gov. There are tangible indicators: increased effectiveness of Western platforms, more coordinated combined arms operations, and increased production and integration of domestic NATO caliber systems such as the 155mm howitzer. However, it's important to note the limitations. Training takes time, personnel must be replaced as wounded, killed, and logistics, spare parts, ammunition, remains a limiting factor. Several analyses emphasize that while NATO support is substantial, it is not an instant shortcut. There are limits to sustainability and time. Conclusion: why NATO exercises make Ukrainian forces so resilient? Because training transforms units into integrated combat systems, tanks plus artillery, plus drones plus intelligence. Because interoperability and logistical procedures keep equipment viable in the field. Because training improves decision-making under pressure, small commands become more effective. However, results are not instantaneous, dependent on spare parts, personnel turnover, and continuity of support. Realistically, NATO training significantly increases the survivability, mobility, and combat effectiveness of Ukrainian forces, making them more resilient than ever, especially when they are able to receive continuous resupply and training rotations.
In the ever-changing war in the heart of Eastern Europe, adaptability is a valuable weapon. One clear example of this is the remarkable transformation of Ukraine's Azov troops, from an infantry unit renowned for close-quarters combat to one of the most lethal armored forces on the modern battlefield. In recent years, Azov units had received intensive training from NATO member states. They were sent to military training centers in Poland, Germany, and the UK to learn the art of operating Western battle tanks such as the German-made Leopard 2A6, the British Challenger 2, and the American M1A1 Abrams. This training goes beyond shooting and driving. It goes beyond that. They are taught advanced armored maneuvering tactics, intra-unit communications, the use of NATO digital navigation systems, and the integration of tanks, reconnaissance drones, and long-range artillery. The result? A complete transformation in the way they fight. On the battlefields of Donetsk and Zaporizhia, field reports indicate that Azov tank crews are now capable of conducting hunter-killer operations, rapid-fire hunting operations in which tank commanders use advanced optical systems to locate targets before the enemy is even aware of their presence. The Leopard 2 tanks piloted by Azov troops often operate in small formations, fast, aggressive, and perfectly coordinated with FPV reconnaissance drones providing real-time aerial views. In several major battles around Pokrovsk and Avdiivka, Azov tanks spearheaded counterattacks. They are no longer simply users of Western technology, they have fully mastered it. In fact, many military analysts have cited the Azov troops' adaptation speed to NATO systems as one of the fastest in modern history. Elsewhere, professional troops typically take years to master complex systems like the Leopard 2, but Azov units have done so in a matter of months.
This advantage stems not only from training, it also stems from motivation. The Azov troops understand that they are not simply operating tanks, they are defending their homeland. Their combination of fighting spirit and technological sophistication makes them one of the most feared units on the front lines. Now, NATO tanks, once merely a symbol of Western power, have become part of Ukraine's signature tactics. In the hands of the Azov troops, these armored vehicles are not just war machines. but symbols of adaptation, determination, and military innovation that have made Ukraine increasingly resilient in the face of Russian pressure. Amidst the ongoing war in eastern Ukraine, one name continues to echo in every battlefield report: Azov, a unit known not only for its bravery, but also for its ability to adapt to the most dangerous situations. The Azov troops are no ordinary force. They were formed not out of political ambition, but out of a determination to defend their homeland. From the beginning of the conflict, this unit demonstrated the discipline and combat prowess that had made them the backbone of Ukraine's resistance on the front lines.
Initially, Azov was known as a light infantry unit, experts in urban warfare, surprise attacks, and guerrilla operations in densely populated areas like Mariupol. But the prolonged war forced them to evolve. In a short time, they learned to use FPV drones, anti-tank systems, and even NATO heavy battle tanks like the Leopard 2 and Challenger 2. Intensive training abroad enabled these troops to master modern tactics that blend Western technology with unique Ukrainian combat experience. Today, Azov is known not only as a ground combat force, but also as a multi-domain unit capable of operating on land, in the air using drones, and even in electronic warfare.
One of Azov's greatest strengths isn't just their weapons, but their discipline and structure. Every soldier is trained to think tactically, not simply wait for orders. In modern combat, where situations change in a matter of seconds, the ability to make quick decisions can be the difference between life and death. Azov practices a flexible doctrine. Each MOG group can fight independently without losing coordination. This is why even when facing a larger Russian force, they remain resilient and often even turn the tide.